Alright, in preparation of cutting out the curve for my brick leg, I need to set up my bandsaw. Two things that need to be dealt with. Number one is going to be just making sure that I have enough clearance here for my overall thickness of the curve. And that's obvious. You can't advance that board through if the guards are in the way. So that's self-explanatory there. The much more important element to us, or for us to discuss, is relationship of the blade to the bed of the saw. And if this thing is out of square, or if the alignment here is off, then I'm going to have all kinds of trouble with cutting out that curve and expecting anything other than trouble when I start doing joinery and cutting the parts out. So I want to ensure that this thing is nice and square. So I have this adorable little square here, which is pretty much worthless for this orientation or application. I have about 6 inches of thickness with respect to that curved apron, and for here I kind of get a sense of what is going on, but I have so much more information with using a larger square. And I can tell by lining this up that I'm just a little bit out of square, enough to be annoying, so I'm going to fix this. Careful word of caution when you're trying to check the bandsaw for square. It's really easy to apply more force into the blade, and by doing that I'm just exerting a little bit of force to my left. There is zero light coming through between the bandsaw blade and the blade of the square, so just be careful about how you approach this. And so I'm not touching it at all. I can tell I'm making contact. Oh, I'm making contact down below, that's right. So I need to tilt the bed a little bit up to the left. I'm going to leave the square in place. And every bandsaw is a little bit different with respect to how to check this and how to correct it. And that looks better. Okay, I'm ready to cut now. So once I've got that, lock the bed into place. Important part about bandsaws, I can leave this guard in this position, but that's an awful lot of blade that's exposed when I'm cutting, which doesn't make me feel good about the process. So what I want to do is bring down this guard. Sorry, I just want to fill in the gaps here of laying out that block, or that curve. Okay, so bring down the guard. Once I've done this, again, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3/4 of an inch or no greater than 3/4 inch above the surface you're cutting. What this allows is for these guides on the top, there's something similar on the bottom as well. It will not allow for this blade to move left or right. If this guard were way up high, any exertion of this force with this block being cut, I can start to bend that blade throughout the cut. So there's a safety factor as far as keeping my hands out of where that blade is cutting, and also then I have a tighter reference between the top guards and the bottom guards, so that I'm really cutting just where I want it to. And then the rest is just cutting, which is the fun part. You'll notice I'm going to try to stay outside of my line, no more than 1/16 of an inch. And here we go. Well, as all things in woodworking, sometimes you get into more excitement than you're expecting, so I almost lost the camera, but we made it through. Alright, trying to slow that down so you can hear me. Let me see if you can see. I don't think you can. Trying to show the amount of material here I left outside of my line. It's fairly consistent, which is what I was hoping for, and that makes it easy enough for me to start to true up this surface and get to what it is I want to do, which is prepare for making the next cut, the interior cut. The last thing I probably should have mentioned before I sign off here is the size of the blade is going to be fairly critical. So general rule is that when you're cutting curves, the narrower blade is better. For straight line cuts, the wider blade is really what you want. So given that this is so thick, there's a bit of a variable here, and I want to sacrifice a little bit of the ability to cut curves with the rigidity of a wider blade. And so this is a 1/2-inch blade, and that's fine. I probably could have gotten away with this curve with going with something like a 1-inch blade or 3/4, something in between. But it makes a cleaner cut. It makes a truer cut for where it is I want to be. All right, so that's all. I'm going to prepare this surface. I'll be doing some creative sanding here. The best tool for this is to mount this to an edge sander, or introduce it to an edge sander. So the edge sander belt will be, if I'm standing at the machine, from the left to the right, and so I'll feed this into that rotational blade in the opposite direction that the belt is turning. And if I did it the other way, if I turned it this way, and the belt is going again left to right, the force or the tendency would be for this thing to pull into the direction of that belt. So I want to go against that force, and that'll give me a good sense of control. And keep your hands moving on the belt sander. Anytime I'm doing that, but I stop, I reposition, I do whatever, I'm going to get a flat spot, and that just means more and more material that I need to take off. So as much as I can, watch your line, and then keep your hands fluid the whole time. Take this off, and then check the curve that you're creating against your full-size drawings. And once you've done that, once you're happy with the outside curve, then we come back in and cut off the thickness for the interior.